Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this afternoon session of our Green Worcester Resilience Summit. Over here in this room, we have Sustainable Yards 101 is the next track that we're going to be talking about. We have three different presenters here today, all excellent. No pressure, guys. But the first talk we want to talk about is going to be on native pollinator plants. And then we're going to go into the next session, which is on edible plants specifically. And then following that, the third is on garden gatherings, do-it-yourself rain gardens with your friends. So different theme on a same general topic. I'm actually very excited here today because all three of them I know a little bit, some more than others, and they're all absolutely experts in their craft, and really excited to learn myself about some of the tips that we'll get here today. So I'll stop talking and I'll like to bring up Leo Da Silva, who is going to talk to us about the native pollinator plants. Leo.
Hi, everybody. So that's the presentation. We're going to talk about creating a resilient pollinator garden. The objectives are we're going to learn how to create a pollinator garden that can sustain itself within 3 years by implementing effective strategies. We're also going to provide some online and local resources. Oh, hear me? Yeah. To assist in creating a habitat garden. What is a pollinator garden and what does a garden resiliency means in terms of a pollinator garden? A pollinator garden attracts and supports pollinating insects such as bees, butterflies, moths, and hummingbirds. These gardens are typically feature a variety of native flowering plants that provide nectar, pollen, and habitat for pollinators. A pollinator garden enhances outdoor spaces and also help to preserve some vital pollinator creatures. So when we talk about a pollinator garden, we're talking about a system that we can enjoy, and we can enjoy the flowers, but we can also see the interactions of the birds and the bees and the butterflies. In Massachusetts, for instance, there are 3 bumblebees that are at risk of going extinct. So it's something that we can also do to kind of help them not to go extinct. We create a garden that can thrive without human input. After 3 growth seasons, it will be a sign of garden resiliency. If you're here to talk about the Miyawaki forest that Maya talked about, creating the system that can kind of sustain itself within 3 years, and that would be the same concept here that we're going to be talking about, but that will be for not woody plants, but herbaceous plants. So it's the same concept. We kind of plant within 3 years, we kind of just can sit back and just watch it, and it's self-sustained. When we talk about pollinator gardens, we also need to talk about the plants that are native to this area in terms of the resource and what you can find out to see if a particular species is native to our area. You can go online and we can do a search. So the search of the Latin name of the species plus BONAP, which is a online atlas that you can look at where the plants are native from. There's a picture there with actually what that looks like. So it's a map that you know with different colors, and you can see where the plants is the range. So the first year, right? So you going to choose an area to create your pollinator garden. It is really best to choose a sunny or partially sunny location for the installation, because this will support the wide variety of flower and herbaceous plants. You can also have a pollinator garden in terms of in a shade area. The only thing that is just a little bit harder to kind of find the species to live in that environment. Pollinator gardens makes an excellent alternative to replacing lawns. If we look around and, our yard, we're going to see a lot of lawn there. There's this huge push of kind of removing the lawn and giving it back to nature and creating habitat gardening. So pollinator garden is really an excellent alternative to a plain lawn. When choosing herbaceous plants, consider the mature height. Some plants are really low. You can have, so let's say that you take your lawn and you want to choose something that is just as tall as the lawn itself, could be 12 to 18 inches. But you can also choose something that it's much larger. For instance, there are some native plants that could grow up to 8 feet tall. I had a picture of a showy goldenrod actually, and my aunt in front of it, and you can see the plant just kind of hovers above her. Preparing the bed for planting. Once you choose the area, if it's just an expansion of your garden bed itself, kind of remove all the unwanted plants and non-natives. That's what I kind of did with my yard when I moved in. There's a lot of non-native plants. One day I kind of just took it all out and started. So if you have a lawn, you can use, which I had a picture to, it's called the Maddock pick, which is a pick that has a flat edge, which is really easy to kind of create cuts around the lawn, and you can kind of remove clumps of the lawn. You can also use a power tiller if you have a larger area. So you can till the area, and then that will kind of bring up all the roots, and then you can just kind of rake it away. The next step will be to amend the soil and mulch it. Soil rich in organic matter is very crucial to creating a resilient garden, as it allows plants to develop strong root systems during their first season. At my talk, she also talked about when creating a forest, they kind of dig in 1 meter and put all organic material there. So that way you create an environment that the plants are easy to send their roots down. It is the same for herbaceous plants. So once you mix that organic material in the soil, you also create a space for the plants to kind of send their roots, and it's much easier for the plants to do that if you have organic material. A great resource that the city of Worcester has, it's actually the leaf and yard waste compost program that they have. It's on 146 across Walmart, and if you're a Worcester resident, you can go there and get some free compost, which is really, really great. One of the things, that particular compost, sometimes there's a lot of annual seeds, so it's not really good for top dressing. So if you have a garden, you really don't want to kind of spread it around, because a lot of the annual seeds will sprout. But if you're creating and preparing soil for a garden bed, it's very, very helpful, and it's free, which is great, right? So you till the soil, you add the compost, you mix that into the soil. If there are any kind of annual seeds within the compost, once you mulch it, you are not going to have any of the seeds sprout. And then you should cover the soil with 3 to 5 inches of mulch to prevent the seed bank from germinating. So, when you have the lawn, under the lawn, there's what's called a native seed bank. Within the soil itself, there's a lot of seeds that just kind of waiting for soil disturbance to kind of sprout. So once you remove the lawn, you're exposing all the seeds to the sun, right? If you mulch it, then you don't have that problem. So even if you're not going to plant it right away, once you prepare the soil bed, it's really important to kind of cover it so you don't have any weeds coming up. Planting your garden, is it ideal to place plants closer together, around 12 to 18 inches apart? And this, once the plants grow, it kind of covers the soil and creates soil shade. So nothing will really germinate around the plant themselves. It's also that shade in the soil also helps with keeping the moisture in there and reduces weed growth. Another concept is that if you have multiple plants of the same species, kind of plant them together and create a cluster. So a lot of at times when I go plant shopping, I buy 2 or 3 of the same species to create a cluster. What that does, it improves the way that the bees are actually going to find nectar and pollen, right? If you think of a garden system that one particular plant is flowering, if you have the same flowering plant, flowering at the same spot, the bees don't have to kind of hop throughout the garden to collect nectar or pollen. They can stay in the same place, therefore reducing the energy that they need to forage. In terms of finding plantings, Garden in the Woods in Framingham, it's a great resource. Additionally, we have Lady Fern Farm here in Worcester that they have local sales. And the Garden On team at the Unitarian Universalist Church, they're also growing plants and they sell it locally. And then we also have the Native Plant Initiative here in Worcester, which is where I am from. I am representing. We have it is the one by Indian Lake. Yes. So the Worcester Native Plant Initiative, we have a lot of I love the 5-minute thing. We have a lot of programs, and we also have a winter soul event in the fall, which will kind of give native seeds away, and we help you how to teach you how to grow them. In the fall, how to prepare your garden to sleep, kind of add all the fallen leaves into the garden. That protects the newly roots, insulate the roots and protect from frost damage. It also provides some hiding spots for the insects. It is recommended that you don't cut down any of the spent herbaceous plants because the birds and insects, they use that as protection. Also, the birds will eat the seeds. So it's best practice if you leave it over winter. The second year, improving resiliency. You should provide some fertilization in early spring and fall. You should remove kind of any weeds that you see during the second growth year. Also add plants for bare soil. In the first year you can add plants, right? And then in the second year you can see where the plants grew more. And then whatever you have bare soil, you should add more plants. Green mulching, it's also a sustainable garden practice, which is kind of adding plants that will cover the soil themselves. Wild strawberry is a good species for that. Third year, just kind of watch, enjoy, and learn. Your garden will be at this time mostly self-sustaining. You may continue to fertilize in the spring and fall. A good rule of thumb is to Easter and Halloween to kind of give some of the fertilization and provide occasional water when you see that the plants are stressed. The bark, mulch, and leaves are now decomposing slowly, and they themselves will provide some nutrients to the plant. You will see a lot of more insects and birds visiting the garden in the third year. And if you need to remove the spent plants, if you really have to cut down the dry plants, it's best to do after if you see a week that the weather's in the 50s, that means that all the insects that were hidden in the dry plant material, they're kind of out now, so it can cut down, and you're not going to kill them. Some of local resources here at the which I'm representing, the Worcester Native Initiative. We are a group of volunteers committed to restore Worcester Native ecosystems. We have there a email list that you can sign up for. And we also have native seeds here that you can take home and start growing your own plants. And then another resource is the Unitarian Universalist Church of Worcester. They currently have the largest habitat garden that it's free in around Worcester, and you are welcome to visit at any time. And I am up.
Well, it's perfect timing too. I was about to put up the one card and he nailed it. So that was good. So thank you, Leo. That was an excellent presentation. Our next up is is Nate Fournier. Nate used to be on our Green Worcester Advisory Committee. Brought in a whole new level of expertise on native plants, edible plants, and it's not just his passion, but it's his livelihood as well. And here to talk to us about edible plants, Nate Fournier. Nate.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. Awesome. Get this set up. But in the meantime, I'll tell you, my goal for this project or this talk is to, only have 15 minutes. We can't get too nitty-gritty into the how to do these things. So my goal is to inspire you all to take one small action, plant a few more plants in your yards if possible. And I'm going to give you some guidance as to why. And there are so many reasons why we should all be doing that. And I'm really excited to go through each and every one with you. So here we are building resilience with edible plants. Not only feeding ourselves, we are feeding the ecology that surrounds us because we are part of the ecosystem, not separate from it. And as we all know, we've been talking about all day today, is that our climate is changing. More and more people are interested in building more resilience into their lives. And I love that word resilience because it applies to so many different aspects of our lives. Not only as individuals, to be a resilient person is a pretty broad scope, but to be a more nutritionally resilient person, to be a more psychologically and emotionally resilient person, and then how that then scales to what is a resilient community, in a resilient city, in a resilient country. So all of these things are really important, and I believe they all start in our backyards. And so those of us who have the privilege of owning our own land and considering ourselves owners of land, which itself is a wild concept, it's a big responsibility. And it's really important for us to take that weight of responsibility seriously and to be responsible stewards of our land. And so my business is Reimagined Roots. I specialize in edible and ecological landscaping, converting boring grass lawns into beautiful, abundant ecosystems. And the foundation of what I do is a lot of foodscaping. Foodscaping is kind of this cool term of, we're integrating edible foods into our landscapes so that they're not only beautiful, but they're also functional. And a big part of that is the design of these landscapes is rooted in permaculture design. If you're not familiar, permaculture is it's a design science of observing nature and seeing how it has created over billions of years of iteration all of these beautiful symbiotic relationships between all living things that our conventional worldview seems to ignore. So we're bringing it back. We're coming back to the way of observing nature and learning from her, and looking at a big part of it. And what I'll focus on today are the edges, right? And so when you look at a forest, you look at an ecosystem, there's always the most life and abundance in that transition from one area to the next. And that most commonly is going to be where our grass lawns meet the forest edge, or a fence line, or around your patio, or around your house. We're looking at these edges and seeing how can we take advantage of all the things that come with that edge to create more beauty and abundance on our landscapes. And with the climate changing, we have to be adaptable and resilient. Again, this is going to come up a lot, and we can all have, there's a lot that we can do, and we'll get into a few different ways of doing that. And today is going to be shrubs. I love shrubs, and it is that transition from the edge of the forest. We see it everywhere. It's that dense shrubby undergrowth. You have a lot of native blackberries and raspberries and these things that we typically look at as, they're kind of weedy in a wild setting. And so I think our responsibility as landscape designers is to use that functionality that exists without us and gently massage it to get our own needs met, as well as encouraging and meeting the needs of all other living things in that system. And so what that looks like are planting these shrubs that, again, as far as foodscaping goes, bigger picture, we can grow vegetables. Everybody should be growing vegetables. Highly encouraging. It's a great thing. It also requires a lot of skill. You have to learn, and it takes years to figure out what works and what doesn't work. And if you have one late frost, it wipes out your whole crop. So from a resilience perspective, vegetables are important. They have their place for sure, but they're not necessarily very resilient. You have to fertilize. You have to keep insects and pests away and diseases. So you got to be careful and knowledgeable. And fruit trees as well. Fruit trees are awesome. They're delicious, and they take 10 years to get established. And they also have their own host of diseases and pests that you have to be proactive about maintaining. And so I love the lazy man's method of gardening. It's like, how do we do this with the least amount of effort, which then increases the efficiency of food that we're producing. So shrubs, again, they are prolific. They just grow so many berries, and there's a lot more than we typically know about. And so I'll go through some, the ones that we know most common: blueberries, blackberries, raspberries. They're everywhere in nature. They're all native. They're here. And so being able to choose things that already exist and thrive here in our soils, in our climate. And there's nothing better than seeing a young kid's face when they pluck a handful of blueberries off a shrub and eat it. Like that nutrition, the psychology of that, plucking a berry that you grew yourself and eating it, there's so much power in that. And then we have some lesser known things, but just as important: elderberry. If you walk through CVS and look in the cold and flu section, there's a host of elderberry syrup for cough and all kinds of different cold and flu remedy. And you just boil down berries. You can make a syrup out of it, and it's a super medicine that we can grow. It's native. And again, this idea of stacking functions, right? Not only is it medicinal and edible and pretty, but it also works really well as a privacy screen for your neighbor. The flowers themselves it's unbelievable when an elderberry flower is in full bloom, the amount of insects and life that is buzzing around those flowers. And then some other ones: gooseberry, honeyberry, goji berry, currants, Nanking cherry are cool. So like a shrub cherry. And then hazelnuts. I am a huge fan of hazelnuts. Again, as not many nuts are shrub form. And so hazelnuts are a great solution because they don't take very long to mature. They get about 8 feet tall. They send up suckers, and you can dig out suckers and replant them. Work really well as a hedge. And again, just as a staple crop, like a well-balanced fat, protein, carb kind of staple crop. Because the rest of these berries on this, you can't necessarily survive off them, but I like to think of them as nature's vitamins. And we have aronia berry, service berry. Those are the amelanchiers and aronia trees and shrubs that, again, so many functions, a lot of ecological value, beautiful, and produce food. Hardy kiwi is a cool one that I was introduced to when I was in New Zealand, thinking it was this tropical fruit, but it is hardy here. We can grow hardy kiwi, and they're actually, like, they call them kiwi berries. They're probably aggressive. They're on the edge of invasiveness, and so you got to be careful with them. But grapes, sea buckthorn, and autumn olive are also on the invasive list. They're also edible. Autumn olive is everywhere, and we see it along our highways. And the reason is because we introduced it, as we do, our brilliant selves, humanity thinking we know best. We come and plant all of these shrubs in our landscapes because alongside of the highways, especially when we were doing excavation, because they are really good at surviving and thriving in crappy soils, and they hold the soil really well. They're good at erosion control and prevention. And birds love them. So they serve that ecological function, but then the birds also spread the seeds everywhere, and then they outcompete our natives. So it's one of those things. They're here, but we can get rid of them if they're on our property, but otherwise they're all over the place, and the berries are fresh right off the tree. They're delicious. You can eat them. You can make jams. So we balance these things. And then pawpaw is getting a lot of popularity lately. It is a native fruit tree that is in the mango family, and it grows in here, and they call it the Native American banana. And it's really cool, really beautiful aesthetic, wide leaves that, again, create this fruit tree. It's a fruit that is resilient. It doesn't have many pest or disease problems. You don't have to spray it with chemicals. You don't have to fertilize it. So that's our goal, is to find these things that just work without our input. Beach plum works really well again in salty, sandy, crappy soils, and we can grow food almost anywhere if we find the right plant for the right place. And gummy berries, which again, a lot of these like small, maybe they don't taste like, I'm not a huge fan of gummy berries. They don't taste very good, but they're medicine. And so medicine's not supposed to taste good, right? I mean, some of them can. So we're talking about nutrition again, like the nutrient profile of these things are like, they're so important. And we live in a society where we do not get the nutrition that we need to live healthy lives, to build healthy, strong immune systems. And so being able to have a few handfuls of berries each day with your kids when you're outside, when you're interacting with your landscape, that's all we need to really improve our immune systems. And again, from a native perspective, there's so much. I mean, we evolved for thousands of years with these native trees and shrubs and plants. So we had to learn what we were able to eat and the importance of them to our health. And that's how we lived until 100 years ago when the grocery store existed and invented. And it hasn't been that long since we've been so dependent on these systems that we have in place that we take for granted now, but they aren't necessarily permanent. We all saw with COVID, like, what does the world look like if there's no food on the shelves? It's panic mode. And so if we can all do a little bit more for ourselves, again, creating resilience in all of our backyards, then that lessens the burden elsewhere. Resilient, sustainable landscapes. Shrubs are just the best option and a really quick way that they don't take up much space. You can plant them on the edge, they thrive, and it creates this, again, this symbiosis, and we're creating whole human habitats. That's our goal here. And function stacking. Again, there's so many functions you can stack on these edges. And so not only food, medicine, pollinators, ecologicals, carbon sequestration, soil building, the list goes on. And really what it comes down to is, what does it mean to create a sensational landscape, a sensational garden? When you imagine a typical grass lawn, looking at the front of a house, it's just grass, there's maybe a couple shrubs, and it doesn't evoke much. Maybe it's a really nice grass lawn. We're like, ooh, nice. You know, if there's something that we like about that perfectly manicured grass lawn. But when it's side by side to the house next door that got rid of all their grass, and instead there's a beautiful cedar arbor with grapes growing on it, there's a stepping stone pathway winding through, these bursts of color and the aroma, the fragrance you get when you walk through there and you pick some berries because they're just everywhere, incorporated into this landscape, and you slow down and you listen, you hear the bees buzzing, you hear the birds, and you just witness that vibration of life all around you. And you step back and you look at these two things side by side. It's like, why are we growing grass? Why is every landscape not like this? And I think there's just this social stigma, there's this knowledge gap, and I think it's closing rapidly. I believe we are in a paradigm shift, and we have all of you beautiful people here working towards this goal of making this world a greener place. And it is very important. It is imperative for the future of our children, for our grandchildren, to leave that legacy. I want to plant this Miyawaki forest. There's nothing better than that sentiment of, I'm planting this tree, and I'm going to bring my great grandkids here someday and say, I planted that. So in conclusion, edible shrubs, they offer beauty, bounty, and a path for a more resilient future. And I think that we can all grow a healthier landscape and a healthier community, one delicious shrub at a time. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Nate. That was awesome. I was just thinking in my own yard as you were talking, and I was like, oh, I should do that and that and that. So, which I think I'm probably not speaking just for myself. So that was awesome. Next up, we have Donna Williams, who's going to speak to us about garden gatherings, do-it-yourself rain gardens with your friends. Donna?
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so rain gardens to the rescue. What are we rescuing? Well, we're rescuing Worcester's waterways because of the concept called a watershed. A watershed, perhaps most of you know, is the land over which rain and snow melt flow to a particular water body. So this is a map of the Blackstone River watershed. And Worcester, as you can see, is at the very top of this system. So all of Worcester's waterways are the headwater tributaries to the Blackstone River. So whatever happens up here flows southeast through the Blackstone, across the state border into Rhode Island, and empties just beyond Pawtucket into Narragansett Bay. So we're not an island up here. we're connected, very well connected. So if we all keep this in mind, then we can lessen impacts of stormwater. But so how about a rain garden? What is it? Well, it's a shallow constructed depression planted to native vegetation to attract wildlife. Often you think of gardens as being flat or maybe sloped or slightly mounded, but a rain garden is a depression. So it's designed to slow, capture, and infiltrate rainwater, mainly from an impervious surface such as the roof of a house or other building, and often from downspouts, as you can see from this illustration. It's designed with a dip in the center. The garden fills with rain after a storm and then drains quickly if it's well designed. So where you put a placement is really important, especially where not to put a rain garden. It must be at least 10 feet from the foundation of a house that has a basement, or where the top of the foundation is below the ponding level, because you don't want to flood your basement. And also for health and safety, you should avoid placing a rain garden within 15 feet of a septic system or 25 feet from a private drinking water well. I don't know if there are too many of those in Worcester, but keep that in mind. And a rain garden should not be placed where you have a wet area. It won't work. And a rain garden is not a water garden. So you want to site it most effectively to catch stormwater runoff, such as at the end of your downspouts from your gutter system on your house. And then you also need to consider overflow. So, as I say, this is quick and dirty. So slope, if you've got a flat area, you're good to go. You need to dig a depression that's maybe 9 inches at the bottom of it, and then the top of it, the top surface needs to be level. You can't have a tilted rain garden because it won't work, but the top needs to be level, and the bottom needs to be level with sloped sides. So if you've got a flat area, you're good to go. But if you've got a slope, then you need to cut and fill and make it so your top level is level and your bottom again is flat with these slopes. So you would have to build a berm, cut away from the high side and put it into the low side to create a berm. And if you have a much more of a slope, maybe a retaining wall would be best. But if it's a real deep slope, find someplace else to put it. Well, how big should it be? Well, this is very simple, and Nate can really get into the details of how big it should be. He's an engineer and does this. So, but it should be sized to store 1 inch of runoff from your 100% impervious watershed, be that your rooftop. And it needs to be 6 inches deep of ponding area and drain within 24 to 36 hours. So how to figure that out? Well, let's say this is a rooftop that has a ridge line in the middle and that vertical dotted line. And we're going to build a rain garden on the left side and we're going to catch the runoff from the 2 downspouts on that half of the roof. So you've got, the roof is 50 by 30 feet. So you get the area of 1,500 square feet, and you divide it by 2 because you're gathering rain from half of the roof. And then you divide it by 6. And that is the factor to use to get the garden to hold 1 inch of water from the roof, a 1-inch storm in a 6-inch deep rain garden. Granted, our storms are crazy now, so that we'll get into that in a minute. So the garden itself can be any shape, as long as it's within the square footage of your calculation. Well, why 1 inch? Well, this has been traditional that around 90% of storms are 1 inch or less. And that's the way it used to be, but isn't now. It's just crazy. So I would suggest maybe dividing your square footage by 5 to make a bigger garden to accommodate these bigger rainstorms. Granted, you're not going to get it to accommodate a 100-year storm, which happened about every 10 years now. But anyway, soils. So soils are key as to the permeability of the rain garden. So there's a simple perk test. You dig a hole 6 inches deep where you want to place your rain garden and fill it with water. And if there's still water in the hole after 24 hours, find a different place. You probably have clay, and the water will just stay there and it won't percolate or infiltrate into the soil. So it's not, the rain garden won't be effective. So this is what we're striving for. It's basically a 9-inch hole, depending on whether you need a berm, all of that, that has 6 inches of ponding area on top of 3 inches of mulch. So you're digging 9 inches, but then you need to figure out what the soils are like underneath. And if you need to add organic matter like compost, then dig in there, but keep this 9 inches. And call dig safe. You don't want to hit the gas line or anything. So this is what we're striving for. This is a quick illustration of a lovely garden. So building it, so plants and maintenance. You plant at a density of about 1 plant per square foot. Dense is good. Tallest plants, water-loving plants, go in the bottom of the garden because that's where the moisture will stay the longest. And then you need 3 inches of mulch. Very important to keep the weeds down and to keep the moisture in. So what to plant? Talk to Leo about what to plant as far as native plants. You can combine shrubs, wildflowers, and grasses, and berry and nectar producers for wildlife. See how this all fits together? We've all drunk the same Kool-Aid. So this is an overview of what we're trying to achieve. You plant the center of the garden with perennials and native plants that tolerate wet feet. Around these, on the slopes, you place plants that tolerate occasional standing water. And then on the outer edge, you set plants that prefer drier soils. So I have some suggestions for those, and then we have some resources that give you great ideas. So plants for sun, a sunny rain garden, you could plant great blue lobelia, Joe pieweed, and blue flag iris in the center of your rain garden because they like wet feet. They have some height, so they would be beautiful. And then on the slope and the outer edge, you could do New England aster, butterfly weed, and bee balm. For partial shade, we don't recommend putting a rain garden in full shade. It just won't be effective. But partial shade, that can work. So the, is that 5 minutes? Okay. So the center in a partial shade garden could be cardinal flower, pink turtle head, purple meadow rue. These grow tall and they're gorgeous. And the slope and outer edges could be foam flower, tiarella, wild columbine, or zigzag goldenrod. So these are only 12 of the many, many native plants that you could use. And shrubs. Well, size matters. The size of your rain garden matters and the size of the shrub matters. So if you're adding shrubs, keep both in mind. Mulch, vital, and the best is aged, shredded hardwood bark mulch. But don't use pine bark nuggets because they float. So you could have, you know, a lovely surface of pine bark mulch after every storm. And as far as maintenance, when you're installing the plants, water them well, and keep them well watered so their roots have a chance to become established. But then after that, these are native plants, and if you've chosen well, they should just do their thing with whatever rainfall we get. And then the mulch keeps the weeds down, so be diligent about the mulch, but then weed those few that do pop up. So we have some resources. We don't have them to hand out, but the links will be online for you. But we have UNH Native Rain Garden Plant List is fabulous. It shows the height, the depth, the blooming time, the water requirements, sun, shade. It's fabulous. The Vermont Rain Garden Manual, equally good. It's excellent. Then in Massachusetts, we have Stormwater Solutions for Homeowner Fact Sheet here. And then Worcester State University has its own rain garden guide, which is from the Massachusetts Watershed Coalition. And I especially recommend the UConn, University of Connecticut Extension website, which these links are to that. NEMO stands for Non-Point Education for Municipal Officials. It's a fabulous website, and it takes you through from soup to nuts for how to build a rain garden. It has videos showing how to do it. It's terrific, and it has a free app too. So so why do we do all this? What's the point? That's the point. So on behalf of the Blackstone River Watershed, thank you very much.
All right, well, thanks, everyone. It's a great presentation. So I'm going to ask you guys, if you don't mind, come back up here. We've got about 14 minutes or so for folks if you've got any questions. I'll call out, point to you, and then ask whomever your question is relevant to.
I'm curious if there are any, if you can combine foodscaping with rain gardens. Are there any particular plants that work well in rain gardens?
Yeah, definitely. So it was cool to see so it was good to see in her plant list already had highbush blueberry and elderberry. But it's at that point it's just dependent on soil moisture and sunlight conditions. And so if you just cross-reference those two lists, the plants that are best in The moisture areas can be planted lower in the rain garden. If they prefer drier areas, they can be planted on the berm. Then it's more of the aesthetic of it. If you, like she said too, as far as the shrubs and things being a bit tall, but otherwise there are other perennial vegetables you could consider that you can incorporate, such as rhubarb and asparagus. May or may not be suitable for the design that you're looking at, but yeah, you've got the options.
Great. Question over here.
I have the same question, Carol, but now I'm gonna add to that. Can you do the same thing like in very dense urban areas? Like, you know, when you have seen some examples, I don't know, like in the middle of a highway, you have in the middle there is like a green area that divides bowls, lanes, and things like that. Because this is another way to create habitat in the middle of the city and in dense, highly populated area. We're talking about mini forests, right? Can you do that as well with using like perennials, like native flowers, like grain gardens, all that?
Yeah, I think we can. I think there's actually a big push for kind of lawn replacement. The new infrastructure that the city is building, you know, it could definitely use some, instead of planting the lawn, it could definitely use some short, you know, grasses, native sedges, and native herbaceous plants to do that. There are some states and some cities in the country that have done it, and they've been really successful in kind of just restoring, making that native habitat in terms of just something that it's a lawn and they have to maintain.
If you travel to New Hampshire and Vermont in spring and summertime, you'll see the median strips on the interstates are spectacular with lupin and black-eyed Susan and daisies. It's just wonderful. So it can be done, and it's all no mow May, but no mow March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November.
That's great. Any additional questions? Mary?
My question is about the seed packets. Do you recommend people start them indoors or recommend them primarily for direct in the soil or container planting? You know, a lot of us who are so used to, we're venturing into more thoughtful gardening. So I feel like if I put them in the ground, the birds might eat the seeds. What do you recommend?
So these are a lot of native plants that they actually need a time of wet, moist, and cold, which is called acidification, before they can actually germinate. These are seeds that don't need that, so you can plant them right now. If you plant them in the garden, it's something that you could, you know, there's a chance that the birds are going to eat. There's also, you need to keep it moist. I feel like if you have it planted in a container or just, you know, whatever you want, a container they can keep kind of close to the house and it's easier to water. And then once they have sprouted and have true leaves, you can kind of place them in the garden. I think that's the most effective way. The Worcester Native Plant Initiative, we have a winter sow program, which we will have a lot more seeds, and we're going to teach people how to do create little greenhouses with milk jugs. You can sign up for that. That's a fall project that we have. And that's a really easy way because you have the system that's self-contained, that you just leave it outside in the spring, they start sprout, and you know, you have all your plants ready to be planted.
Yes, over there in the green spot.
Hi, I have two quick questions, one for Leo and one for Nathan. So Leo, in the mulching phase, what do you recommend using for mulch?
You know, I'm cheap, so I like to get things for free, right? You can buy mulch, the aged
aged hardwood?
Yeah, aged hardwood shredded mulch is one of the best because it doesn't decompose as fast as pine. But we can also, so for big projects that I've done, I called tree companies, and a lot of times if they're working around the area, they're trying to get rid of the actually shredded bark that they cut down the trees, they shred everything, and they're looking for a place to kind of get that out of their way. So we can call some of the tree companies and see if they have any bark mulch, and they usually deliver it for free if they're working in the area. One of the things that people say about putting that kind of green mulch is that it tends to, when it decomposes, it stakes nitrogen from the soil. So a lot of times the plants can show a little bit of stress. One of the things that you can do to mitigate is to buy some fish emulsion and kind of spray on that and give some nitrogen. That will kind of balance the decomposing of the bark. But I like it free, so I usually call the tree company and see if they can have some free mulch delivered, and they usually do. Sometimes they're actually happy to they don't have to take it somewhere else and spread it.
Thanks. So to Nathan, your list of all those shrubs, do you have that somewhere that, and particularly with maybe the scientific names, because sometimes common names are things that could be different plants, so that we could actually, or pictures, so we could actually know exactly which things you're talking about.
Sure, yeah, we can definitely coordinate to get it posted on the website with the recordings of these sessions as well. And yeah, and I can update that and send a more detailed list with the scientific names as well. And one thing on mulch too is like a leaf mulch is really great. Again, in the fall, there's so many leaves that they're so abundant, and it's another one of those somewhat ridiculous things where we break them all away and send them away and then pay somebody to bring in new compost in the spring. And so if you have the capacity to set up a small composting system in your own house, then having a tree ring and allowing those leaves to decompose in like a fenced area, like just a ring of fencing, you allow those leaves to partially decompose, and it's a much more bacterial rich environment, whereas wood chips are a bit more fungally dominant. And where that comes into play are for shrubs and trees, they like the fungal environment a little bit more, so that the hardwoods and the bark mulches are really suitable for that. They still work for perennial beds as well, but a leaf mulch breaks down a lot faster, and it's more of like a blend of, it's like a pre-composted mulch that works really well for perennial gardens. And I'll give a quick shout out to, so there's a company called Mad Mix Leaf Mulch. It's like a processed, very well, weed-free, it's kind of expensive, but a product that you can buy, and they supply that at DJ's Landscape in Boylston. And then also in Boylston is the Asian Longhorn Beetle Processing Yard. And they say it's for contractors only, but if you know somebody with a pickup truck, they're pretty flexible, and it's a beautiful hardwood mulch. It's one of the great things that's still around from the ALD time is they have to double grind those hardwood mulches, and it's not bark, it's actual hardwood grindings. And they get it down to less than a half inch to make sure if there are any beetles in those trees, they're able to kill them through that process. But now there's mounting some mulch there for free, or just for delivery free if you know somebody with a truck.
Okay, we got time for one more. Gentleman in the hat.
Yes, seeds for large areas for pollinator gardens. We got 2 or 3 acres that we could turn into a pollinator meadow. So, individual plants will be just cost prohibitive.
Right. So in the fall, the Worcester Native Plant Initiative, we will have a lot of seeds that we can kind of give some to you. I think it really depends what the amount that you want, but we will have plenty of seeds. We have been installed.
I've done it in Connecticut. I just wondered if there was a process to plant them.
You can put down your email and we can connect later on in the season, and we can definitely give you some seeds. Yes, yep.
I got one more. Xerxes Society as a good source for native plants, native pollinators. What's just online? It's a society that promotes native plants.
Yeah, that's a good resource. Yes.
I wrote that down. All right, well, timing is good, so we'll stop there. Thank you so much for our panelists for their information. And thank you also for being excellent sports and winnowing down what easily could have been a whole presentation for each one of you guys down to 15 minutes each. Really do appreciate that. No, that wasn't easy. Thank you so much.